Sexual activity in Japan continues to be a problem among those who are single. However, what about those who have gotten married? Now, it turns out that less and less people in Japan want to establish relationships, but then there are people who do get married. It just turns out that a huge portion of them are in what's referred to as sexless marriages. Now, first, let's define what a sexless marriage is. They consider a sexless marriage a couple who has not had sex in a month, and they don't plan on having sex anytime soon. Now, I think there are plenty of couples who don't have sex for a full month, and that's not the end of the world. That doesn't mean it's sexless, but it's more the prediction that sex won't come anytime soon that they're concerned about. Now, a survey by the Japan Family Planning Association found that nearly half of married couples had not had sex for more than a month and did not expect that to change in the near future. That's okay. A record high of 47.2% of married men and women said that they were in sexless marriages, up 2.6% or percentage points from the previous poll in 2014, and significantly higher than the 31.9% recorded when it conducted its first survey of the nation's bedroom habits in 2004. So the number continues to increase. The highest rate of sexlessness was found among people in their mid to late 40s. So look, I think that the fact that the country is overworked plays a huge role. There is an effort by the government in Japan to kind of curb long working days. There was a person, 25-year-old woman, who actually committed suicide because she was working 100-hour weeks. I don't even know how that's possible. But she was working so much that she couldn't take it anymore and she took her own life. So again, Japan's government is trying to do something about this, but when you're working long hours, the last thing you really want to do is go home and think about knocking boots with your partner.
I'm halfway not buying that.
Yeah.
So let me explain. Context is important here. First of all, I feel like Japan gets picked on too much for this topic.
Yeah.
There's so many stories about how they're not having sex in Japan, and I wish they had more context for comparing it to other countries. Now, why do they do that? The reason is because the fertility rate in Japan is disastrously low. It's at 1.4 children per woman, and in order to ensure stability of a population, it needs to be at 2.1. So this is a shocking stat. Are you ready for this? Japan's population today is 127 million. That's a decent, sizable amount. By the year 2060, it's expected to drop to 86 million, to go from 127 to 86.
Right.
Part of the issue for Japan, by the way, is that they should allow a lot more immigration. If your fertility rate is lower, one of the ways that you maintain your population rate is through immigration, but they're too insular. And so it's continuing to create bigger problems.
Hold. Why is that? I didn't know that.
Why is
the
it
immigration?
Japan is just, you know.
No, not why they have that policy against immigration, but why does immigration increase?
Well, first of all, it just brings new people into the country, so you won't drop as many to as low a population. But second of all, immigrants, now it depends on the area, but oftentimes will have more children because people who are poorer, ironically, have more children, and so and immigrants are usually poorer. So these are all generalizations, but they hold across. It's not because they want to have sex with the immigrants.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm like, oh, is it like they're allowing like hot Cuban immigrants into the country, and the women are like, oh yeah, like let's go for it. Like I think about things in my context.
Or hot white women, and the Japanese guys are like, yeah, let's do it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's not. It's not because of that.
All right, I'm glad I asked for the clarification. It's important.
People need to know. They need to be educated. Okay, so it is true that they have a fertility problem. We don't know how many sexless marriages there are in other countries, although they say that number is rising.
It is.
In the UK, US, and in other parts of the world as well.
So I looked into that a little bit because I wanted to compare the numbers in Japan to the numbers in the United States. And one of the more recent surveys that were done in the US, this is back in January of 2015, indicated that as much as 20% of marriages in the U.S. are considered sexless marriages, right? And so, by the way, there's like this huge misconception that, you know, everyone's having sex and everyone is having a happy sex life. The woman's the one who doesn't want it, but the guy's the one who always wants it, but he gets shut down. Like, there's all these myths and misconceptions that actually make a lot of couples feel shitty about their situation. And so, yeah, the number's high in Japan, but it is, you know, kind of high in the US, and it is increasing. And I do think that this obsession with overworking ourselves has something to do with it. What do you think it is?
Okay, so I'll get to that in 1 second. But again, to give more context here, if US rate's around 20 and the Japanese rate is at 47%, that's a giant difference. So then that phenomenon is real. And you could tell even within Japan, as Anna read to you, it used to be 31.9% and now it's 47.2%, and that's just in a span of about 12 years. So it is going skyrocketing up. And I think, Anna, to answer your question, it has a ton to do with the internet and internet porn. So if I think that the internet has, of course, obviously been getting more and more popular throughout that time, and 35% of guys in Japan are saying, married men, are saying they're too tired for intercourse because they work too hard. Now, if you gave them a completely new woman who is attractive and at the end of a very long day and said, do you want to have sex with her? 99.8% of those men would say, all of a sudden, I'm not too tired. That sucks, but it's true, right?
What about women, though?
That's probably true.
22% of women surveyed said that they found sex troublesome. Would they find it troublesome if some hot new dude shows up? Probably not.
Okay, but that's also
Probably
true.
not.
But that's true. That's right. So that's the situation we find ourselves in.
I know,
Plus,
but that's. Here's the thing, though. That has been an issue with
Forever.
monogamous relationships forever, and the numbers were
That's
never
right.
this high. So,
but then that's when you bring internet porn into the equation.
but internet porn is not the same as the tender, loving affection of a woman.
I hear you, sister,
Right?
and I agree with you. But I think that a lot of people are now in a situation where they're thinking, it's a hassle. So whether it's a woman who finds it troublesome, when I can get exactly what I want the softcore stuff and it's right there and that's what pleases me, or more likely, slightly more likely, guys who are like, oh, I've got to make her happy, got to light the candles or bring the roses. Oh, but this is the porn, this is exactly what I like. Fuck it, I'm just going to do this, right?
Yeah, I hate to admit this, but there might be some legitimacy to your argument, especially when you consider the most sexless country in the world is also the most obsessed with building sex robots.
And yes, and very connected in terms of the internet. And so I think this trend will continue to rise throughout the world. And finally, the last stunning fact here in a story chock full of stunning facts. Among 18 to 34-year-olds in Japan, 42% are virgins.
Yeah.
They've never had sex. 42% of 18 to 34-year-olds are virgins. Wow! So the stories about how they're not having enough sex in Japan are not overhyped. It apparently, statistically, is true. If I was single, I would get on a plane so quick to fix that problem.
Oh my God, Cenk.
That is so inappropriate. I'm a bad man.
You're a cochino. That's what you are.
Whatever that is, I'm sure I am.
Okay.
Corporate media is awesome.
Wrong.
Independent media is the way to go.
Believe me. Believe me.
Support independent media right now. Become a Young Turks member. tytnetwork.com/join.